So, welcome back to Out of the Hourglass. How are you this afternoon?
I'm good. How are you? Good to see you again.
I'm good. We were just lamenting about the cold.
Yes,
It's just a really cold time of year if you
I'm
live in the
over it.
Northeast. I know, and it's only December, but here we are. Comes every year. Seasons are here for a reason.
Mm,
But this is I think, a good time for us to be reconnecting. You've obviously been on the podcast before. I think it was June of this year.
hmm
But we're in budgeting season, we're in planning season. We want to make sure that we're making a point to and be investing in things for the business that are really important on the front end and being proactive about because you have seen the dangers of not doing that on the back end, especially from an HR perspective.
for sure. Absolutely.
Yes. So we're going to dial it down to like 5 misconceptions about HR in small business. And you were just saying this doesn't matter if you have one employee, if you have 100 employees. The misconceptions here can
hmm
impact everybody.
That's right.
Before we had the 5 that we came up with, is that because you just see a pattern of it all the time?
Yes. So there's always a pattern, and these are areas that will affect, like you just said, all businesses. So this podcast is going to be especially important. So take some notes because this will affect every single business that is out there. If you have one employee, these are areas that you need to focus on. So this is going to be a good one.
All right, let's dive in. Okay, so the first one comes down to employee classifications. So 1099 versus W-2, having a hybrid team. It seems simple, but you say that there are some easy ways to fall into traps here about kind of knowing how to classify people correctly. What is the misconception when it comes to classifying employees?
So the misconception is that, we've been doing this for a long time. I've had 1099s. I haven't had any issues. So let's just leave it as is. Perhaps I'm only using this person as needed, seasonal, temporary. It's not that cut and dry. It's
Mm.
really more about, is this person truly an independent contractor or are they truly an employee? This is very, very important to understand the differences between both.
So, how do you go about classifying folks correctly? What makes a 1099 truly a 1099?
So with the 1099, there needs to be that autonomy. Are they in control of their schedule? Are you their only client? Do they have a business? Just because somebody says, I am and I want to be a 1099 does not necessarily mean that they really are. So the idea that this person is going to have that autonomy is huge. Are you their only source of income? Do they have other clients? And do you say to your 1099, you must be here today or you need to take this particular job? If you're doing that, they are not a 1099. They are an employee because you are instructing them and you have the control. The key is that the 1099 needs to have control. But also, is this a piece of your business that is a main component of your business? So let's say you're a landscaper. Is this person cutting grass, right? If they're cutting grass, that's a big
Mhm.
piece of your business. That's an employee. That is not a contractor.
Interesting. I can imagine if folks who are listening to this have already identified a potential issue. If they have hired, if they use 1099s and maybe those 1099s only work for them. What are the right questions to be asking, especially if you are starting to think, oh, maybe I've misclassified some folks here. How do you go about correcting that?
So it really would start with a conversation with the particular person that you're thinking about. And really, it's okay to make a mistake, right? It's all
Hmm.
about a good faith effort to make things right. So if, for example, you're ever audited by Department of Labor or something happens where your books are opened up and somebody comes in and audits and say, well, why did you do this? You can say, you know what? I educated myself. I brought in a professional and then we realized that we're not doing things correctly, but this is how we tried to fix the issue. So it really shows a good faith effort because the reality is every business owner, you're a lot of times you're learning along the way and
Completely.
it's not uncommon, but at least you're taking the opportunity to make corrective action. So that's the key here.
Hmm.
And then just make sure that you're not making those mistakes in the future. That's the
Are
key.
there like a set of questions? I mean, I'm sure that there's resources out there,
Mhm.
but if you're, thinking about bringing on subs to your team or, you're hiring for subs, are there questions that you should be asking to also make sure it's the right 1099 contract for you?
Yes. So it's important to say, how many clients do you have? Do you have a referral list? Where are you advertising? Do you have a website? Do you have an LLC? Do you have liability, business liability insurance? The key factor here is there are a lot of independent contractors, even in fields that I do, where they'll say, I'm a contractor. Here's my social security number. They really should have an EIN number, a business number that really establishes them as a business. People do, and I understand they use their social security numbers, but it's really important to make sure that they are established, because at the end of the day, it puts you at risk for many, many different types of liabilities, financial liability, legal liability. And it's just not something that I would ever recommend it. It's like, you're trying to, and I understand you want to save a little bit of money, you're not paying certain taxes, payroll taxes and things, but it really could cost you a tremendous amount of money and resources to rectify the issue if something does happen.
So I was going to ask, what are the risks of doing this incorrectly and really not paying attention to it? And it sounds like pretty heavily financial risks are associated.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. It could be legal, it could be fines from Department of Labor. It could be, penalties pertaining to pay time off, sick leave. I mean, but it goes on and on and on. So where in the front you might, be able to save a little bit of money by not putting somebody via payroll, you really need to tread lightly and be very, very careful. Very careful.
We have I feel like a lot of clients now, but also I just see like a lot in the industry, not only just not painting, but also landscaping and GC remodeling, hybrid teams, a lot of hybrid models. Do you see that from your experience? Does that tend to work well? Does that help to really show the difference between what W-2 is versus 1099? Because I feel like if you have all 1099, that's where it can get a little bit tricky, because
Right.
Where are the boundaries? When you have a hybrid team, it tends to be a little bit more apparent. Is that true?
When you have a hybrid team, it's really important to look at your team as a whole and say, is this person bringing on a special service or a special skill or talent that does not drive your business 100%? For example, if you were to bring somebody on, let's say they're part of a marketing firm or they're a marketing social media and you're a landscaper, clearly that is not the main piece of your business. But if you were going to start doing work in a different state, but that particular person maybe is going to be doing landscaping in a different state, then they're going to be an employee because they are going to be doing work in a different state. So that comes with even more challenges, because you want to really make sure now that if you decide, okay, now I really need an employee in this particular state, it's very important that you now are registered with the state, that you're following the rules, the guidelines, and you have established policies for each location, because you have to remember it's not based on where your business is located. It's based on where the business is being conducted. So if you're in New York, but you have an employee in Texas, you need to make sure that you're following the laws and rules and regulations of Texas for your remote employee. So if you have 10 different remote employees in 10 different places, it's important that you have all of those guidelines in place.
You just so nicely went into our one of our misconceptions here, and that is that multi-state compliance and remote workers, and not necessarily realizing the implications of that. What are some common problems that you see especially when clients begin to expand and have growth into, states, especially, I mean, you're in the New York area.
Sure.
So you probably work with companies who are working in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts.
Sure. It's a very common challenge, right? So in particular, we're in New York. We have Westchester County, we have New York City. So a business might say, well, I have an employee that's always working in New York City, but I'm based in Westchester County. It doesn't matter. It does matter, because based on where the business is happening, Westchester versus New York City have very different rules and regulations, let's say pertaining to paid time off, and things are always changing. So the way that I always recommend to our clients is we would make sure we have policies in place by really establishing, let's talk about handbooks, right? Because we should all have handbooks. So we would establish a core handbook, and then we would have all these different state addendums according to where you have your employees conducting their work. So you have your core values, your core policies, but then underneath you say, please refer to your state specific paid time off or sick leave, because depending on the area, they're very, very different. And if you don't follow the rules and regulations, it can be very problematic.
Do you see, I mean, it's like New York is probably a great example where this is
Hmm.
pretty tricky. California, another one. Is it common? I mean, so I'm located in Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia. Many different counties kind of surround Philadelphia County. Is it common to see like a vast changes just going from county to county in a lot of different areas?
It can. So I'll give you an example. Chicago is a big one. If you're looking at Chicago as a city, their
Hmm.
laws are can be very different just from the state of Illinois versus California. You have LA, then you have other counties where they're all different. They're similar, but it could be in New York City coming in 2026. Now you have to have a unpaid separate bucket for unpaid sick leave that is really to help parents help take care of their children if they're sick, maybe take care of family members. So there's all these different buckets of paid leave and time off that can be very, very tricky. And even with paid time off, certain states require that even if a person is terminated, that you are required to pay out on that PTO while others don't, as long as it's specific in your policies. So where you might say, oh, I only have one employee in New York City or I only have one employee in California, it's very important that you have at least your policies in place that are where they need to be, because if they're not, it could be a challenge.
So for any companies thinking about, growth going into 2026, and if that growth includes expanding into other territories that might be known to be a little bit more tricky on, the rules and regulation side, moving, taking job opportunities in another state, these conversations need to be a part of that growth plan.
100%. Yes, it's very important.
Okay, so we don't want to forget that. I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know a lot of companies, especially who are doing this, have dedicated HR, managers, and so are thinking about that. But I'm really thinking about like the smaller businesses who, especially those who maybe work in Pennsylvania and do work across the border in New Jersey, anyone who is near a state border and thinks they can easily jump between the two. There needs to be some kind of some flags of awareness around what that looks like.
That's right. It's really based on primarily like an office location. So if let's say you're located where I live, I'm on the border of Connecticut, right? And our
Hmm.
office is in North Salem. Because we're so close to each other, if the majority of our folks are coming into the office, even if they're going over the border to Connecticut to do some work, the majority of their work is done in North Salem, New York. So I know we're going to go according to those standards, but it would be very different if I had a person working remotely in Connecticut and they didn't report to the office and they were primarily working in their home office. Then we would need to follow the Connecticut laws and regulations for their pay time off, sick leave, whatever other policies we would need to be concerned about.
So interesting. Okay, great misconception that there's
Mm-hmm.
not full awareness of. Okay, number three, and this one is going to hit home for a lot of people,
Yes.
is I have an office manager for that. HR function, oh yeah, my office manager can handle that. This is
Yeah.
has to be something that you see and hear far
I
too
hear
often.
I hear this all day, every day. And
Yeah.
I can so appreciate that because you have this trust and you value your office manager and they really do what they need to do. But it becomes really challenging. Most office managers wear many, many hats, right? They're not just focusing on HR. They have the talent and the capability to perhaps help with those tasks. But do they have the core information, like an updated handbook? Do they have the skills and tools to make sure that they are doing their job correctly? In particular, if you have an employee relation challenge, right? You want to make sure that you are handling things correctly. So as an example, if you want to terminate an employee, if that termination is not done correctly and is then deemed as a point of retaliation, that can be a really big problem. So it's so important that I always say document, document, document. The documentations need to be standardized within your business to make sure that there's a SOP in place or a standard operating procedure in place. So when these challenges happen, your office manager knows this is how you should handle the situation, but they also should know that it is okay that they don't know everything and that they can reach out to either a legal team or a team like ours, where they pick up the phone and they say, I have this situation. I'm not sure how to handle it.
Hmm.
And that is the best advice that I can give because it's very difficult for an office manager to handle everything correctly. And if I know people will say, well, we've never had an issue in 30 years or 20 years, 10 years. It's not a matter of if, it's when.
Yeah.
It takes one phone call, one disgruntled employee, one random audit. It could happen to anybody. It happens all the time. And that is really when the challenges can and will be.
How does an office manager who is tasked with a lot of the HR responsibilities,
Mm-hmm.
how do they know when or what's the best best way for them to be able to identify a situation where they do know that it is maybe over their head in the sense where they're not as up to date on how this needs to proceed. When it is important or time to bring in a specialized contact, whether it be a legal firm or someone like Utopia who does has HR professional work. How do they determine that?
It would really start with having a firm like ours come in and just make sure you have everything in place, meaning your handbook, your posters, your policies, and sit down with the office manager and say, these are all of your tools. When you come into these types of situations, and I would literally list them out,
Mhm.
train them and say, please contact us. We will walk you through the process. There are certain areas that an office manager should not be touching. In particular, terminations, write-ups, and it really, you have to remember, there are people that are part of protected classes, right? If you're over 40, you're part of a protected class. If you have to be so careful and delicate with these matters. And whenever you're terminating an employee, typically they should know that it's coming, right? Because you have had those conversations,
Yeah.
you have taken the time to coach them, give them the tools that they need. So it should never be a surprise. When it is a surprise, that is really when it can be an issue.
So, how do we empower our office managers who maybe feel like they are overtasked with these responsibilities? That, I mean, if they're listening to this and being like, I'm doing things I probably shouldn't be doing,
Mhm.
how do we empower them to have those conversations with the appropriate, whether it's the business owner, it's a GM?
It's not always easy, right? Because an office manager is so important to the business, right? And I see this time and time again where I'm speaking with business owners and they'll say, oh, I have this person in my office. He or she is amazing. They can handle that. And an office manager in particular, they never want to disappoint management. But I
Mhm.
also believe that being a strong partner in a business, like an office manager, comes with the territory of saying, you know what, this isn't an uncomfortable conversation for me, but through my research, there's a lot of areas of the business that really we should look at, and let's look at it together and then just bring facts to the table, right? Like if we don't do these certain things correctly, this is what could happen. I really need the tools to be effective and efficient, and see if you can have roundtable meetings with your leadership team, because you know what? That's part of being a professional, is saying, this is just not in my wheelhouse. There are
Yeah.
specialty people for all different areas. Same thing for me. There are things I don't know, and that's okay. That's why I have partners, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's okay to say, I don't know. That's part of
Yeah.
being a professional.
Absolutely. That's a really, really good point. Okay. Misconception number 4 here, and you've hit it a little bit in terms of employee handbooks, but it is I started my business, I put together an employee handbook, we've got the basics in there, it's good enough. That's not correct, is it?
It is not. So, things are always changing. You can always go to federal websites, state websites to attempt to keep, up to date of what's changing. But, there's a lot of new changes and good changes too, right? Like you have certain lactation policies, certain states you're
Hmm.
required to pay. Things change yearly. That's why it's so important to look at your handbook every single year. Make sure your posters are up to date. Make sure, again, PTO is a big one, right? You want to make sure that you're paying your people appropriately. The sick leave, things are changing. Just in New York State, they're adding so many different buckets, and it's changed within the last couple of years dramatically with the amount of time, how you can use it, whether it's carryover, no carryover, yes carryover. So things change all the time. So you never want to say, oh, it's good enough, because you want to make sure that your employees understand rules, regulations, and policies. And this is how you're going to grow and develop your people and your business, right? So if the back
Hmm.
end of your office is not in shape, how do you expect to grow your business efficiently? You just have to make sure everyone's on the same page.
When you do update it, and for those companies that have HR managers and HR teams who have the
Mm.
resources and know kind of where to look for those updates, before I get to my question, another one just popped up. For those that don't, let's go back to the office manager. They are now tasked to update the employee handbook for the
Mhm.
next year. You just mentioned you can go to federal sites, but when does it get to a point where it makes sense to have an HR professional look over that handbook and make sure that it does incorporate the updates correctly? Is that common to do?
Yes, so that's typically where we start with HR support within our team. Is, we look over the handbook, we'll do an internal audit, and it sounds scary, but it doesn't have to be scary. And just by being proactive versus reactive, you will save yourself a tremendous amount of time, anxiety, stress, money. It's an investment in your business. It's very, very important to have somebody that has that experience looking at it, because it's important how you word everything too, right? It's
Yeah.
very, very important.
When you've done this, when your company has done this with other companies and, done an audit and made suggestions, are folks ever like shocked by the number of changes that need to be made? Basically, like they thought that they were good and then they get the audit results back and it's red pen all over everything.
Sometimes it's a surprise.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times they're like, this makes sense. This makes sense.
Yeah.
We've been stuck in our ways, but it's this sense of relief. You
Yeah.
can go to bed at night knowing and put your head on your pillow saying, you know what? I made the investment. I know my business is protected. And if something ever happens and there's a DOL audit, we've done our absolute best to make sure we have all of our ducks in a row. And I just
Yeah.
think with any business, it's important. Even if you have one employee, have a simple handbook with posters. Just make sure you're where you need to be.
Yeah. I mean, even with one employee, and whether or not you have growth desires, it's setting those behaviors early on so that it's not something when you realize, oh, I have 10 employees now. I have not put nearly enough time into making sure that I've got my HR, policies front and center and people are aware. It's a lot easier to have those behaviors in place from the get-go.
I would agree with you 100%.
When a handbook is updated for the year,
Mhm.
is it best practice to reshare that with employees and get them to sign off on it? But how are we making sure that our employees now know of the updates that also exist?
So it should never be here's a handbook and acknowledge it's really important to dive into the handbook, go over specific policies, especially when you're referring to sexual harassment trainings, expectations. It's very, very important that you take the time as an organization. It could be as a group, it could be one-on-one, and then answer any questions and give it to your employees first so they can review and come to the table with questions. A lot of times we say, oh, we see here's the handbook, sign off and move on. But that's not doing anybody any justice either because you want to make sure that everybody understands the expectations, right? And it also shows that you're taking your business very seriously, that for us to be, productive and grow, even if you don't want to grow, it just sets a tone and a standard.
Yeah. So holding an annual meeting or holding,
Yes.
huddles with your teams and identifying the areas that we've updated or things that need to be called out on.
Absolutely. And the acknowledgement piece is very important. One thing I would always recommend if you're doing this virtually, use something like DocuSign or an area where they can sign it and you have record because you just want to make sure it's just best practice to have a record of when that was signed and documented. Okay. And also it should be available to your employees as needed for reference.
Okay. So they can so ideally they can access it whenever from anywhere should they need to.
100%. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. The last misconception that we want to talk about here is, high turnover and retention problems in the trades, that it's just the trades. This is what happens. People come, people go. But you say doesn't have to be that way.
It doesn't. So I understand, especially in the trades, it's very difficult to retain people, especially if they have a talent that is hard to find, right? So I would always start with saying, have conversations, do a check-in. People fail to understand, yes, money is important. Pay per hour, salary is very important, but people want to feel connected. They want to feel important and they want to feel heard. Mm-hmm. So if you can have those one-on-one conversations, and you have to build a rapport and a relationship, right? Very important. And hopefully you can have candid conversations and you check in and you say, how's everything going? Is there anything we can do to support you? And they may say to you, and it happens all the time, you know what? I'm really looking for an opportunity for growth. Or they may say, I'm interested in staying with the team. However, I've had other opportunities here where I can make an additional 50 cents per hour. Why would we want to lose somebody that's great talent for 50 cents an hour when it would cost you anywhere from 30 to 40% plus, sometimes even 100% of that person's pay to attempt to replace them? Yeah. So it's important to have those conversations, have those check-ins, see what they want to do in the long term. Some people don't want to grow and that's okay. Or some people do. Just really the communication, and make sure people feel appreciated. It's about building a good culture, right? We want to build, and when people come to your organization, it shouldn't be a surprise. They should want to come, and you should have built your brand. People talk, right? Yeah. You in your communities, there are certain organizations that people say, oh gosh, I don't want to work for them. And then there are others like, oh, it's a great organization. They really help. They pay well. They take care of their people. That's where people want to be. Yeah. So it's building brand awareness, reputation, and also, have a referral bonus for your employees, because guess what? Your employees know other people like themselves. So if somebody comes to the table and says, you know what, I have a friend that has the same skill set that I do. What do you think? And then they have the ability to make an an additional revenue, why not?
The employee experience perspective is a big one that we've seen some emphasis on at our Grand Summit conference last month in
Mhm.
Seattle. Our keynote speaker, her name is Tiffany Bova. She wrote the book, The Experience Mindset, and it
Mhm.
really looks at kind of that intersection of the customer experience and the employee experience, and that's truly where success lives.
Mhm.
So often businesses are so customer service oriented, wanting to make the experience better for the customer, smoother, communication better, faster,
Mhm.
but it's done at the expense of employees.
That's right.
And as a result, you mean employee burnout, bad culture, things feel toxic, people feel not heard, and you think you're doing, right by your customers and that's going to make you successful, but you're forgetting about that key component and it's your employees, it's your team. They're what make the machine work.
That's right. You have your internal customers and you have your external customers, and we
Yeah.
can never function without our internal customers, our people, right?
Yeah.
If we don't have good people in place, we don't have a good culture, we don't have a business. Same thing
Yeah.
for me. Without my people, I don't have a business.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we embrace them and we see them as people and not just folks that are clocking in, clocking out, right? We have to appreciate them and also say thank you. Thank you goes
Hmm.
a long way.
Just yeah, that expression of gratitude, absolutely, and a genuine, expression
Yes,
of gratitude
yes.
goes a long way. Of those five misconceptions that we hit, which one are you most passionate about?
I'll give you two perspectives. So,
Okay.
in terms of protecting a business,
Yeah.
the policies in place, those are vital because if they're not in place, you have a business owner and a team that are working tirelessly and hard to make sure that you're growing. But one misstep can really be problematic and destroy what you've worked so hard for, right? With one
Yeah.
lawsuit, one problem, it can affect a lot. But the other area that I'm very passionate about are people and process, right? Because people are your internal people, your employees are what make your business thrive. And we have to always remember that behind every employee, there's a person maybe with a family, or they're trying to achieve career goals. And we always have to put that person front and center and say, we care about you and genuinely care. Because
Yeah.
if you do that, your business naturally will grow. And there's something to be said about we're at work more than we are with our family. So it's
Yeah.
very important that we're creating a culture where there's growth, there's success, and we can have those hard, candid conversations without the fear of being retaliated against. It's very, very important.
It is surprising. I mean, it's a known fact that we spend more time with our colleagues than we do with our own families. Yet still, and a lot of companies have made progress and have worked on culture, but there's still those, maybe it's old school stubborn who just haven't really grasped that as
Mhm.
like, the time that you have is only so much, and not really kind of grasp that employee experience really can impact like the whole human experience at the end of the day, and
Sure,
how they
sure,
show up to their families when they have that
sure.
time with them.
Sure. It's
Yeah.
it's it's very important. And I truly see time and time again, people are willing to get paid less money if they are reporting to a job that they feel appreciated, they feel valued, and they're excited at building a business, right? And it's
Mhm.
collaborative. So it's so important to have those real conversations. And like I say, treat people like people, right? Like we we
Yeah.
all we all have very similar things that we want to accomplish in our lives, and just be really cognizant and aware of that, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot.
All right, going into a little curveball here, going into 2026, what, from your perspective, from your team's perspective, what are you guys watching? What are you putting the pulse on in the HR space? That you think is going to change or might impact, how businesses operate. Is there anything that you see on the radar that you're keeping a pulse on?
We're always looking at rules and regulations. So, as an example, non-competes are always front and center. They
Mm.
talk about that a lot, whether certain you're going to be allowed to, if you are, what's the threshold. So that's something that I'm always interested in watching and seeing how that progresses. But also, it's more about certain states are really focusing on employees and that quote unquote work-life balance and making sure that folks have access to care and the time off that they really need. So
Mhm.
those rules are constantly changing. So we're always just seeing how, certain states are putting employees first. And that's something that we're always looking at. And for us too, it's all about, building a team where we're focusing on people and process, but also making sure that, our partners and companies we work with see the importance of valuing their people.
Yeah.
Because without people, you're just not going to have a business.
Yeah. So if you don't value your people, you don't work with a company like Utopia. It doesn't,
Yeah.
that's not a good
Just
fit.
no, no,
No, doesn't
no,
work.
no, it doesn't. And we're
Yeah.
realistic. We understand, you have a business to run, there are budgets. We completely understand that,
Yeah.
but it has to be a better balance.
Yeah. Lisa, remind our listeners, for those who didn't get a chance to hear the previous podcast episode back in June, how they can learn more about Utopia, and there's the work that you all do.
Of course. So we're a boutique HR firm, and we focus on working with small to mid-sized businesses. In particular, we love working in the trades, construction, automotive, manufacturing. We have experience all across industries, and we work all across the country. But in particular, we love working with our trades and our construction. They always bring something very special to the
Mhm.
table. Very, get your hands dirty, roll up your sleeves and get in there. And that's what we truly love, because that's how we function. There's nothing too small, too big that we won't work on. And we become a part of your team, whether it's for the long term or short term. So,
Yep.
we appreciate the opportunity to help where we can, and we customize everything. So there's no small question, nothing too large, nothing too small, and we're happy to help in any way that we can to make sure your business is compliant.
And I think that's important because I think I can only imagine in this space, especially smaller businesses who don't have the HR expertise on their teams,
Mhm.
aren't always sure where to turn, or they have a question, but they think it's too small of a question to actually reach out for. But your response to that is like, those are the questions that can make or break things, if you
Yes.
don't do it correctly.
That's right. And their questions are important, right? And for us, we always build that relationship first. We want our clients to feel comfortable,
Yeah.
because sometimes people are like, I don't know if that's a great question. All the questions are great questions. We just want to help and support. There's no judgment. Let's have a conversation. Let's just have a conversation, and it's okay.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for jumping on here again and sharing your expertise. It's always nice for us to have kind of an HR partner in this space, especially in the trades and small business who we have a shared client base. Like you
Mm-hmm.
said, we also love working with our business owners in the trades. They're a work hard, play hard group.
Mm-hmm.
They don't give up. They
Yep.
go through the roller coaster of good years and bad years, and it's tough. Business is messy, but they're a
Mhm.
resilient group of people.
Yes, they are. And we love our trades and contractors, and be happy to connect and answer any questions. It's not a problem.
How can people connect with you, Lisa?
Go right onto our website, utopiahr.com, and you can click on the contact us page, and we'll get right back to you.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure to list that in the show notes. You will hear from Lisa again, I'm sure, in the future when it comes. We'll be sure to be bringing you back on for HR questions down the line. Gosh, we should do one where we have people submit HR questions and
Ooh,
we
that's a
can
good
go through.
one.
Yeah, I
That's a
like
really
it.
good one. I
I
love that.
like.
It's a great idea.
Yeah. All right. So stay tuned. But in the meantime, thank you so much, and until then.
Thank you. Appreciate it.